Today, the UN General Assembly is expected to vote on whether to remove Russia from the Human Rights Council. Yesterday, the U.S. and its allies announced more sanctions against Moscow. Nancy Cordes has more from the White House. Nancy, good morning.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. And when it comes to these sanctions, there's definitely a balancing act going on here, with the U.S. Treasury Secretary warning Congress yesterday that global prices for energy and food and so many other goods are already on the rise as a result of this war. And those prices are only going to go up even more if the world takes the obvious next step and fully blocks Russian oil and gas.
President Biden issued his latest salvo Wednesday in the financial war on Russia, freezing any U.S.-related assets held by Russia's largest banks and sanctioning the two grown daughters of Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I'm going to sign an executive order that's going to ban any new U.S. investment in Russia.
He said the global sanctions imposed so far will shrink Russia's GDP by double digits this year. But Russia's massive energy industry is still largely untouched.
You can't cut off his cash flow until you cut off his oil and gas exports.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky urged world leaders to do just that Wednesday, saying if there is no painful package of sanctions, no real supply of necessary weapons that we have asked for many times, then Russia will see it as the permission to go further. But shutting off Russia's oil spigot could devastate European economies.
We continue to assess how we can maximize the impact while minimizing the impact on other economies, including, of course, the global oil marketplace.
As for the weapons Zelensky wants, the U.S. Secretary of State insisted Wednesday the world is already stepping up.
Between the United States and other allies and partners, we have provided or will soon provide 10 anti-tank systems, 10 for every single Russian tank.
This UN vote that's coming today to strip Russia of its seat on the UN Human Rights Council is in direct response to the horrific images of alleged war crimes that have taken place in Bucha and many other areas in Ukraine. But Russia, Anne-Marie, is rather ominously warning UN nations that a yes vote today will be viewed as a, quote, unfriendly gesture.
Right, and they have said before that they would respond to unfriendly nations, if you will. But I want to ask you about these sanctions on Putin's daughters. Initially, I thought, so what, their credit card's not going to work? They can't buy, a designer bag anymore? But then I thought, a lot of observers believe that Putin hides his wealth with some of his family members. So I wondered if the repercussions could be more than just they can't go shopping.
It's certainly possible if those two, his grown adult daughters, one of whom is a tech executive, another is a doctor and genetic researcher, if they have any U.S. accounts, those accounts will now be frozen. But it's also meant to send a message to Russian leaders. And these two women were not the only children of oligarchs, of Russian leaders who were sanctioned yesterday. It is sending a message that it isn't just members of the regime carrying out this war. It isn't just oligarchs, but it is now their family members, their children as well, who may not be involved in these atrocities, but are benefiting from the wealth that they gain. In many cases, ill-begotten gains, and that the net is widening. And so, it's just another step, another piece of the puzzle as the U.S. and its allies in Europe try to find new ways to put the squeeze on Russia. And finding those new ways obviously gets more and more difficult as time goes on.
And, just like with all the previous rounds of sanctions, there's criticism. The criticism that this latest round of sanctions does not go far enough because, listen, if you don't cut off Russian oil and gas imports, that is the primary way that this invasion is being funded. Is there any discussion about, moving more aggressively in that direction, particularly for European countries that depend so much on these imports?
The discussion is taking place around the clock. But what you hear from a number of European nations is, look, we're trying to wean ourselves off of Russian oil and gas as quickly as we can. We're looking for other sources. But if you just shut off the spigot from one day to the next, our economies are going to be devastated. It was really eye-opening to hear the U.S. Treasury Secretary tell Congress yesterday, look, we're seeing global prices go up for everything. and that problem is only going to get worse. You also saw Deutsche Bank coming out yesterday and warning that the U.S. could go into a recession, not just as a result of rising prices due to the war, but the inflation we were already seeing as a result of supply chain issues stemming from the pandemic. So there's a precarious situation here that U.S. allies are trying to balance as they figure out ways to meaningfully punish Russia without punishing themselves too harshly at the same time.
Yep, it's a delicate balance. Nancy, thank you very much.
You're welcome.